Okay, so this is just a quick mini lesson to go over some of the requirements or expectations for writing an ethnographic methods section. So I'm providing this primarily to help you guys who are working on drafting your methods section, just to give you a sense for what should be included and what doesn't need to be included. So first of all, what is a methods section? Well, you guys are in intermediate writing, and so by now you've probably encountered a couple of different versions of methods sections. So a methods section is basically just the part of your paper where you're describing how you collected your data. This looks different depending on which discipline you feel most comfortable with and what you've seen more regularly. So, for example, in some of the more quantitative areas, disciplinarity wise, your data section where you're talking through like how you collected your data is going to be really detailed and potentially really long. Other disciplines have more of a summary style approach, or their methods aren't as quantitative in nature, so they require a little more qualitative description. For an ethnographic study, since we talked about already that ethnography is a genre that was developed in the social sciences and it has different methods. And if you didn't get that from last week's reading, you'll certainly get that from this week's readings. The whole approach is different than a quantitative study. We're not doing an experiment in a sterile lab environment. We are out in the field. So what you want to do in your methods section is you want to help readers understand the scope of your project. You want to frame both how you collected your data, and that should help frame the results for readers. And just like in any other rigorous research genre, we want to be detailed enough so that this project could be replicated. People could read it and go, oh, okay, I could do those observations. I could collect notes like that and perhaps come up with the same analysis. So when I said ethnographic methods look different, it just means that you're going to have to make a few different moves. So something that isn't as apparent in like a lab experiment that we do need to be sure we do in ethnographic methods is define the field. And I'm not talking about like the field of composition studies or the field of sociology. I mean literally your field site. Where did you do your observation? What was it like? How did you go about engaging with the field? For you guys, for all of you, it's going to be the field of St. Vincent Sarah Fisher and this online tutoring program, or the GED program, as the case may be. So you want to define the field. Where were you? How did you get your observations going? You definitely want to report the number of participants. This is more important, I think, when you're doing field research in a less structured environment where you're just kind of maybe at a school observing various classrooms, etc. But even here, right, this is a more complex social arrangement than just a tutor and a tutee. You guys have been doing observations of other tutoring sessions. You've been working with volunteers and staff at St. Vincent Sarah Fisher. There's the tutees themselves. There's a lot of different participants potentially to account for. Then you want to frame yourself. What I mean by that is not just acknowledging like I was a participant observer, which you should do, but also like where were you positioned in this social interaction? Were you completely outside just taking notes in real time? Or more likely for you guys, you were the tutor. You had a direct role in the interaction. So what's the process of your observation? And how did that come about? And where are you in the scheme of things? Are you more like a fly on the wall kind of observer, or are you more participant in the actual process? which leads us into describing your recording and note-taking process. If you are able to take notes in real time, fantastic. Do it. The closer that you can take notes to the actual events that you're observing, the more accurate your notes will be. However, if you, like me, are really all in when you're having a discussion with anybody, let alone a student, maybe you're going to need to take your field notes after the fact, which just means as soon as possible, when the tutoring's over, you write down everything that happened. You write down your thoughts and reactions in a dual column style, like we saw in the examples last week. Either way, you want to be clear about when you were able to take your field notes, if that makes sense. So that's all great, Nicole. What does this look like? I'm going to show you a shorter example here, and then I'm going to show you a longer example. And that's just to say that probably for our class, we want to hit somewhere in the middle, right? Your method section might be more than a paragraph. It's likely that it will be, but I'm not looking for, like a 2.5 page method section. But let's look at this. Okay, so we've got sample number 1. I conducted this research doing visual ethnographic methods as well as participant observation. So right off the bat, we have some of that framing going on here. To work collaboratively with Connolly in order to accurately describe her role as a community leader. So it looks like this person is focusing on an individual. We met weekly at the Hansen Center in order for us to discuss both the commitments involved in participating in the research, but also to watch her interact with volunteers and take photographs of the garden and work. Each visit to the site would begin with me greeting Connolly and her leading me out to the garden. I would spend time asking questions of volunteers and taking photographs. Field notes were dual perspective and recorded after the fact. This led me to reflect on my observations and critique my own stance and assumptions. Okay, so the things that I like about this is that it's pretty compact, but there are some areas where, as a reader, I want a little more information. I want to know how many meetings occurred. I want to know how many volunteers were present. I also want to know about the questions. I want to know if there was a specific interview protocol being used. So there's a little bit more work that this writer could do to make this methods more informative for a reader. So let's look at our other example. I'm just going to pull this up. This is a methods section. It's going to be a little bit longer, so I'm not going to read the whole thing to you because I want to keep this video rather short, but I want you guys to see some of the differences here. So again, we have some intro sentences that are talking about qualitative data through open-ended interviews and on-site observation, which is likely a sentence similar to this is a sentence you're going to want to include in your methods section. The data we gathered was acquired from 4 target populations: staff, volunteers, students, and teachers. So this is important to know different populations that were involved. Data was collected through participant observation, formal interviews, etc. So then we're going to scroll down. We've got this population. So up here, we're describing the field and some of the data gathering mechanisms. We know that it's a school. We know that the interviews are formal and informal. Now we're going to talk brass tacks, numbers. Research population, 24 students, 2 volunteers, 3 staff, and 1 ESL teacher. So, even if you don't have these kinds of numbers, it's important to be as specific as possible. And then something that's also really nice that's going on here is that there are specifics about the types of questions that were asked. Then it goes on to describe exactly what questions were asked for the different populations, and with little explanations about why, in order to fully understand structure of the program. We also conducted participant observation. So all of this is really good specifics, and then they're going to start getting into their coding and analysis. One thing I would say is that as a reader, even though all these specific questions are really good, there's precious little explanation of the rationale for each set of questions. We have this couple of sentences here to describe the participant observation, but for me, I want to know more about what this task to observe the forms and types of activities, what does that look like? Where were these observers? How were they gauging what efficiency looks like? So there could be a little more detail here and maybe a little more explanation of rationale for these questions. So I hope that this helps you kind of get a feel for the exact moves that you want to make in your method section. Once again, probably you're going to want to go longer than a paragraph, but this method section here, this is like 2 pages, 2.5 pages. I don't think you need to go that long. Probably 2 to 3 paragraphs is going to be sufficient for this project. Though, if you're enacting lots of different methods for your study, you could need to write more. Who knows? I hope that this helps you get your head around the methods section draft that we're working on this week. Talk to you guys later.